my hometown of Rome, New York, I've always kind of said, I mean, I've lived in Phoenix over 30 years now, however long, and I couldn't get enough people to half fill a room at a funeral here, I don't think. I mean, I've got friends that golf, but, people come and go. But I always knew if I ever wanted to actually have a funeral that was attended, it would be up in Rome, my hometown. And I can thank Facebook a lot for that because, these are contacts that I probably would have lost if not for social media. So I've got a big bunch of friends who are up in that area. So it occurred to me, why don't I have the funeral while I'm still alive?
You're listening to The Real Estate Sessions, and I'm your host, Bill Risser. With nearly 25 years in the real estate business, I love to interview industry leaders, up-and-comers, and really anyone with a story to tell. It's the stories that led my guests to a career in the real estate world that drives me into my 9th year and nearly 400 episodes of the podcast. And now, I hope you enjoy the next journey. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 400 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. Yes, I said 400. This is a huge milestone. Probably the last milestone of this podcast as I have decided to kind of wrap things up next July. I'm going to finish right at the 10-year mark. And so I wanted to have a special guest on episode 400, and this doesn't get any specialer than John Bjorlie. John is the creator of the Bjorlie Die Happy Tour 2024. I've talked about him before. You probably know who I'm talking about when I talk about John. He's a stage 4 prostate cancer patient. It's terminal. He understands that, and he's decided that he wants to go out on his terms, which means he is visiting a lot of people around the country. He's done things like thrown his own wake. I'm sure we'll get him to talk about that in this episode. And just some of the other things he's doing are fantastic. And so we're going to have a lot of fun chatting with him today. You might want to buckle up. It'll be, I'm sure with John, we don't know where we're headed, but this is going to be a lot of fun. So let's get it going. John, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hello. I love it. John, you're the very first person to say hello and that's it on the podcast. I like that. I think that's very cool. I can't tell you how excited I am to have this conversation with you. I'm actually in Phoenix. I'm at your home, and we just got off the golf course, had a great Mexican dinner, the West Coast kind of Mexican dinner, right? Had, what was yours?
Carne asada quesadilla. Oh. Yeah, it's a quesadilla with steak in it.
And I had my little kid menu, the thing that I love, which is roll tacos. But everybody's got their own different kind of foods they like. John, it was a no-brainer for me to have you as my guest on episode 400 of the Real Estate Sessions.
Can I cut in on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Congratulations on 400. I'm honored to be the guest, even if it just so happened the numbers fell this way. But I remember when it was just an idea, and I'm pretty sure it was in Canto, 3rd or 4th hole. But I remember one day we had time between shots, and you told me about before there really were podcasts. I mean, podcasts weren't hardly a thing yet, Anyway, well done.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. You know how we probably got to that conversation was I loved listening to Howard Stern interviews. People ask me, right?
Yes.
And you do too, right? And so the ability to do the same thing, to ask questions of people and to not have to worry about...
And in your industry, real estate, to go that direction.
Yeah,
I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
Other than Bill came up with another way to make his job harder. You've always seemed to have done that. Everyone else is trying to get it easier.
You've got a point there.
Yeah.
I did do that. Well, I know you've listened to a few episodes, John, so I'm going to start off the same way I always start off, which is generally saying the thing I just said. But then I'm going to go, you're an upstate New Yorker. You grew up in Rome, New York, which is near Syracuse and Utica and all these other places that are from Europe.
Yeah, particularly Italy.
Particularly Italy. Tell me about growing up in Rome, New York.
I've often told people my father was Norwegian, my mother was Polish, but I was raised Italian.
Gotcha.
And that's how it was, a very Italian city. If there was any diversity, well, not that there was no diversity, but there was a big Air Force base there, and that brought in that population. But otherwise, I mean, the name of the city tells you how it is, And it was a small city up in farm country, central New York, and a great place to grow up. You remember the show Unsolved Mysteries?
Yeah, yeah.
One time, the host, I can't remember his name, but he once described Rome, New York as a city right out of a Norman Rockwell painting.
Okay.
But at the same time, he was describing a case where 2 people were murdered in their house mercilessly. So it's a city like of a lot of things. But it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah. What's one thing we should know about Rome? Is it the Air Force Base? And you've talked about it before, that the bombers, like did they have the B-52s?
It was a B-52 base during Vietnam, and missions began and ended in Rome. I mean, they would leave from Rome, bomb Vietnam, fly back to Rome without ever landing. You know, it was over the North Pole. That's one of the reasons. All interesting stuff, but those things were just part of our life. I mean, the biggest, loudest jets you ever heard. But it all started out military. Rome was a fort during the Revolutionary War and the American Indian War. But after the wars, the fort was actually disassembled and a town was built out of it, out of a lot of the wood.
Wow. All right. Tell me, your dad has a very interesting backstory, I think. I mean,
I guess I got used to it. It wasn't,
It wasn't that big a deal, yeah. Your dad was an educator?
Of the deaf.
Of the deaf?
Yeah, his parents both worked with the deaf, educating. My grandfather was a minister to the deaf. There were a lot more deaf people back then when you go back 100 years or so. But my dad he ended his career as a superintendent of a school for the deaf in New York.
Yeah. You also shared with me in one of our millions of conversations that he had some work he would do for the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
He was a very well versed, is that the word for it? But in American Sign Language. He felt he had abilities that a lot of other people didn't because he had moved around the country a lot in his career, from the Midwest to California to New York. We had been around. And he said that sign language has dialects, just like a lot of other. There's accents. You can move your hands a little differently. But because of that, my dad was chosen to be an interpreter for Supreme Court cases that involved a deaf person. If they had to take testimony from a deaf person, they would have him do it. There might have been a couple others, but I know that he was one. And late in his career, he did that several times.
So if they were from a certain part of the country, he could sign in a way that was more comfortable for them.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Using slang that they use that they might not use in Oregon,
Yeah. There are a few things I can't wait to get out of you in this interview. One of them is you are, in my opinion, a fantastic piano player. Now, you'll always go humble on it. You'll go, no, I don't do what these people do. But I know if I said to you, John, could you play this song for me? If you know it, you will. And if you don't, you can learn it. And you don't read music.
Yes, that's how it's been.
My first assumption is, and by the way, your sister Lisa, we all see the videos that are out there now. You guys are playing together. She's singing beautifully. You're playing the piano perfectly. Was the Bjorlie family musical growing up?
We were. Well, we sang together like the Von Trapp family. I used to say I was in middle school before I realized not all families sing in 5-part harmony. That Happy Birthday doesn't have to be a whole big production, but we always enjoyed it. If we were on road trips anywhere, we were always singing, and again, always in multiple parts. Like by the time you were 5, you better be able to pick a lane and learn to sing it.
Wow.
But yeah, everyone in my family is musical, and like everyone is good at something. At least one thing.
Your mom has a great story, right? She sang professionally.
Yes, she was a songstress in the 1940s, a little bit of the 50s. She definitely quit on the way up, not the way down. It's kind of an interesting story she had. She met my father, got married quickly, and that was it for sure. She did. They lived in Washington, D.C. For a number of years while my dad was finishing up grad school. And she did continue singing in Washington for a few, because she had a name that was recognized. But other than that, she never went for the big ring, and it was kind of out there, but she stopped before. And this is kind of interesting. We believe, we're not sure, but she was in the middle of a tour, we believe, when she decided to quit. or at the end of a tour. But at the end of the tour, the intention was to record her first album. And it was going to be with the Tex Beneke Orchestra. That's who she had been touring with. And if you don't know that, that's Glenn Miller's orchestra after Glenn Miller died.
Wow. Yeah.
But she was going to record an album with them. It was going to be them accompanying her singing. She quit, and she was replaced by someone nobody really knew of, but Edie Gourmet.
Oh,
so
wow.
So in some ways, Mom always thought that she saw Edie Gourmet living out the rest of it. If I would have stayed with it, what would have happened?
Yeah.
So it was just kind of an interesting thing. But
yeah, for you millennials out there, go Google Edie Gourmet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about you and the piano a little bit. So when did you start taking lessons? It's weird that you took lessons. You're very skilled at what you do. But is it weird that you don't read music? Do most people read music?
None of the Beatles could read it.
Okay, well.
Yeah, George Martin was the only one that could read or write music, and that's what he was used for.
Okay.
So that they came up with a song, he could actually write it down so that they had it. And they, and work from that. Or when they had symphony. Yeah, but it started with, we got a piano when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old because my older sister was taking lessons. And this thing turned up in the living room, and I immediately was kind of gravitated to it. I heard my sister practicing, and I'm thinking, I think I could do that, and I kind of figured things out quickly. I started out with one finger, and I can still remember very quickly learning to play the Star Spangled Banner with one finger, just standing in front of the piano, but making few mistakes, and it just went from there. At some point, I learned to add the second hand. And then by the time I got to around 10 years old, that's when my mom wanted me to take lessons. But I was already pretty good. I was already covering a lot of songs that would surprise you for a kid my age, that kind of thing. It was a lot of old, Broadway hits, that kind of stuff. And I started lessons, and it didn't go well. Maybe 5, 6 lessons, and I wasn't learning. I just have a mental block with reading music. I've really tried, and I can kind of figure out the notes, but I read music the way like a 4-year-old would read a novel. I mean, crawling through it, one word. I can never imagine just boom, And I have an older sister who is a piano teacher. She's a master on the piano, and she's the exact opposite of me. She can't memorize anything, but she can play anything you put in front of her with music. So
I'm sure your piano teacher loved the fact that you weren't learning how to read music.
Yeah, well, he just told my mother, you're kind of wasting your money on this kid. He said what he's doing is he's listening to me play the song he's supposed to learn for next week, and he's memorizing it on the spot and not reading the notes. He just practices what he thinks I played for a week, and then I can tell that he's not reading it. And so anyway, I dropped out, but I did later. There's a couple people I worked with along the way. There was when I got in high school, a guy who was a year or two older than me, but he was an accomplished piano player who also played by ear, and he helped me develop that direction by ear. Here's what you need to know if and so I got a lot from him. And then along the way, other people I've met and worked with, there's one particular woman named Robin that I'll always wonder about because she taught me one of the toughest things I can do, and I always wonder, and I taught her something,
That's cool.
But I always wonder where she is. Never knew her last name.
So as you get older, your piano playing skills get better. You also decide that you're going to be a diver. So I'm guessing that started in high school?
No, junior high school.
Wow.
And I hardly decided to be a diver. I mean, the quickest story is 2 of us were skipping class on the day that they have signups for winter sports. We came around a corner. There's our guidance counselor. We see him from behind, so we ran because we knew big trouble for being in the halls. This is during homeroom period, so nobody's in the halls. So we ran as fast as we could to that winter sports sign-up, sat in the first bleachers available so that if he came in, he wouldn't find it, And it happened to be swimming and diving. If it was basketball, I would have been signing up to get on the basketball team, and I would have bombed out of it quickly. But when my friend and I were sitting there, he goes, "We dive, we like that. Why don't we try that?" And so we both signed up for the junior high team. My friend went to about 2 practices and quit, and I stayed with it. I had a little bit of a knack.
Not only stayed with it, but Stayed with it through into college.
Oh yeah. By the time.
Yeah, and when you were asked by Virginia Tech, offered a full scholarship to come dive.
Well, I don't know if it was full scholarship. They said a scholarship. They never gave me a number. But yeah, my senior year they offered me. But yeah, I was on a diving scholarship for 2 years. And I was never that, middle of the road, I'd call myself. I was never a great diver, but enough to get a scholarship at a smaller school, and that's what I got.
And the water seemed to have this attraction for you, right? Because not only were you diving in college, but you decide that you're going to learn how to play another instrument that I guess is a relative of the piano, but called the calliope.
If all jobs paid the same, it's the job that I would still be at, that I had in 1978. I transferred from one college to another, and in between, there was a riverboat in Charleston, West Virginia, a sternwheeler like the Delta Queen. One day, I happened to be, my mother that year had driven me down to college, and she just went back with me, and then she was flying back the next day. So the next morning, I went to her hotel, and I was going to bring her to the airport. And while I'm waiting for her to get ready, I'm looking down because her hotel is right over the river, and I see this sternwheeler down there, this big, beautiful red, white, and blue, riverboat. And there's somebody playing an instrument. I don't even know if I knew it was called a calliope at the time, but I was riveted. I'm watching this because I could hear him. I'm 20 floors up, and I could hear him clear as a bell through the window. And I'm watching him, and I said to my mother, I said, Mom, if I ever don't come home for a summer, it's because I got a job playing that thing. And she said, okay, I'll remember that. And the next summer, I got the job playing that thing. And I did that for a whole season. Best job ever. Crazy. People who don't know what a calliope is, you hear it in the circus. Papa, papa, one of those. It's an organ, but it had a 6-mile range. So everybody heard me whether they liked it or not. And it was just a fun thing to do.
And you talked about the owners of that riverboat, right? They turned out to be almost like family for you when you were kind of doing that 5-month stint. Was that true?
The people, at the captain and the crew in the boat, we were very close to each other. We spent 100 hours a week together, easy. Especially if we were out of town, that's 24/7.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the management of the boat, we were all very tight. There wasn't that many people involved in it, to keep it going.
Most requested song on a calliope. Did you take requests?
Yeah, and it's funny. They used to always call it the quick one. Play the quick one. Play the fast one. A lot of people couldn't remember the name Zorba the Greek.
Okay.
But I used to play that song starting very slow. Da, 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 and it gets, I used to get wildly fast on it. Da, 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 faster than I can sing it. And every note has a corresponding light that lights up when you play the note. So the sky is just filling with this light going crazy because I'm playing all these notes. But anyway, that's a lot. Then there was always the West Virginia fight song from WVU. Oh, West Virginia. Oh, West Virginia. Yeah, everyone wanted that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, John, you graduate from Virginia Tech. What's next? What were you thinking? What was the plan for you?
My parents had moved to the New York City area when I was in college, so that's where I was going to go back to. I had a degree in marketing, so the most obvious thing to do was to maybe Madison Avenue was an hour commute from their house.
Yeah.
Get a job in Manhattan in advertising would be cool. It's right in my major. But at the time, it was 1980. The economy was horrible. Jobs were almost impossible to get. And, so I never went that direction. I did go to a few interviews in the city, but I learned quickly I didn't like the commute. I didn't like going into New York. I mean, it's fun for a day, but not for my job. That just seemed like it'd be a lot to do. So,
but you had another natural talent. I know we've talked about this on thousands of fairways, but you are a sales guy. You can sell just about anything.
That's what I found my way into.
Yeah.
Business to business telemarketing.
Yeah. Talk about that. How did that first start? What was the first gig?
Well, the first thing is they were hiring. That was, okay. and I went to a place, and I remember it was a real nice office. You had to wear a jacket and tie and all, so it was all very formal. But as I learned to do it, I mean, to me, not that we were cheating anybody. It's a, I don't even want to call it a gray area business, but you're definitely manipulating people, and And I just got to enjoy that challenge of it. To me, when I was a kid, I used to like making prank phone calls. Is your refrigerator running? Better go get it. But people will pay you to do that, to make prank phone calls. And all you got to do is make someone say yes,
Yep.
So that kind of became, love it or hate it, but that's what I ended up doing.
And it was a career in sales that eventually gets you to Arizona. There's just
Yes, there was a point. The company I was working for in New York, 4 of us just decided to open a satellite office out here. 3 of the salesmen and the owner of the company, simply because we wanted to live here. Houses were cheaper.
Yeah.
New York I was having a hard time finding a house up there at the time. Long Island's expensive, and everything was half the price here. So that's how it started. That's how we got here.
And then ultimately, you created your own company, the company that you retired from, basically,
right.
just
I ended
a few
up
years
leaving
ago.
them. Right.
Yeah.
The company I was working for sold maintenance chemicals, cleaners, sanitizer, degreaser, patch for concrete, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff you would sell to the maintenance departments of companies. And I switched to shipping supplies.
Okay.
And I was selling to the shipping departments of companies.
Around the
stretch
country.
film. All over the country.
Yeah, with your own systems and processes in place. Because realtors, it's funny, because you're not a realtor. But
No.
But real estate has a.
But aren't we
real
all
estate has
realtors really?
real estate has a link for us. That's how we met. Part of it, right? But,
yeah.
So we'll come back to that. But so it in some way it had to be a giant leap. I mean, you're leaving probably a fairly comfortable job where you were probably doing okay, and you decided you wanted to start your own. Were you was there a confidence there, like this is not going to be a problem, I'm going to do this? Or did you go into it going, well, we'll see how this goes?
There was actually a lot of confidence going into it, and I don't like the term not to toot my own horn, because I'm tooting my own horn.
Yeah.
But one thing I had was me, which was one of the best people in the country at doing this. So if nothing else, I had me. I could sell. And I had tested it a little bit before I opened the company. I went home some afternoons and tried selling tape. I tried, I called people in the local area. I got orders that I never even shipped because I didn't have a company at that time. I just wanted to know I could get yeses, And once that worked enough times, then I was ready to just open up my own. And then I did work it alone for a good period of time, a good year or so before I hired the next person. And it never got more than like 5 or 6 at a time.
Yeah. But very successful. You did great in that gig, and you were able to finally retire from that.
Yeah, and successful enough. That industry got hard. Anybody who's telemarketing has gotten tougher. And,
absolutely.
And it was getting, there's, and the competition, you got Amazon, all these things happening.
Yeah. The internet
it was getting hard to open accounts, to get new accounts. And if you can't get new accounts, you're in trouble.
Right. Let's talk about you and I a little bit. We got connected through a game we both love, golf. I have my version of how we connected. I'd like to hear it from you. How did we meet? What was it like? What did you think of me?
Okay. Oh boy, I didn't know that was coming. Well, we had a mutual friend. There was a friend of mine, John Dunn, but there was a group of us that on any given Friday, 2, 3, 4 of us would show up and meet somewhere to play golf. And on one of those weeks, it was 3 of us, me and this friend, John, who called and said, would you mind if I bring a friend along? And we knew John was a real estate broker, probably somebody, it was some work colleague, and you're the one he brought along. And I remember liking you right away, if that's what you want to hear. No. Well, that's the cue card you're holding up. So
I'll put the card down.
Okay.
Here's the applause one. No.
Yeah, and your game was good. You seemed to have a lot of fun with us. You got into the skins game right off the bat. It was just a lot of fun.
You were big on nicknames in the league, as I noticed that when I got there. The league, you had Long Ball, which was Bill. Long Ball. You had a Parrot Head, Chris. He was who he was. John was Smiling John.
Smiling John.
Because he was always smiling.
Because he always was smiling.
John Dunn. Yeah. And then I got a nickname. Do you remember the nickname you guys gave me on day one? Because I had a really good day that day.
Yes, because we said, well, before we're going to play for money, what's your handicap? We got to make sure, to be fair one way or another, if you're way better or worse than us, that's what handicaps are for. and you said a 7, which kind of falls right in ours, you
Yep.
know.
At the time.
So, yeah. So it was, no problem. Well, there's no need to give strokes or whatever. And you went on to kind of clean us up that day, but shot something like under 75, and we had our usual 80s, and and so you were called Lucky 7 from that point. Yeah, you'll be lucky if he shoots 7 over par.
It never happened again. So yeah. So that's how we got to meet, right? So for anyone listening, going, what does this have to do with real estate? We've just tied real estate into this conversation. Okay?
Right.
Good. But really, and we spent a lot of time just sharing these moments between us. You and I played with some numbers. It's roughly between 850 and 900 rounds of golf we played together.
Do you think I've
looked it up.
I'll bet you have.
I played with it.
Yeah, I'll bet you have.
It's thousands of fairways we've walked together, and we never walked in silence. It was always a conversation going on, right?
Absolutely.
We had a lot of fun, through all those years, and so that's
the only silence comes when you say shh.
Well, I do have to. You have a booming voice, John. I think you know that. So
Yeah.
I have to calm it down when we're walking by another foursome teeing off. Yeah,
and easy. They can hear you.
I was your official shusher.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
good.
interrupt.
Yeah,
I
that's
did.
fine. But look, I want to get to what's going on now. And so, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, and you are
Dying.
Okay,
There you go.
way to be blunt.
Yeah, right.
Well, you're almost at the end of year 1 of what?
Well, I don't know what you're looking for, but
I'm looking at the John Bjorlie Die Happy
the Die
Tour,
Happy Tour, yes.
2024.
Yeah, that I started a year ago because I was given a year to live. Actually, I was told last October that I probably wouldn't make it through this summer, and I've done that. And I'm feeling actually pretty good.
So, John, you were diagnosed a few years ago with prostate cancer that was caught kind of late, right?
Yes.
So, and that was the issue, is that it had already metastasized.
Right, stage
to
4,
your
which
spine?
means, when I went into the hospital, I just went to the ER because I was having one problem that I'd hope
Right.
I would just leave with that fixed.
Yeah.
But the first thing they saw was that I had spinal cancer.
Okay.
And then they told me that night, because they put me in a room right away and all, and they said, you better hope that the spinal cancer came from your prostate, because spinal cancer kind of doesn't ever start on its own, I think. It came from somewhere. And he said, it's usually the lungs, and if it was the lungs, you're done. There's nothing we can do for you.
Okay.
Just, he was being very frank with me. But it turned out to be the prostate. So there was my lucky, I'm doing air quotes, break.
Is this 2019?
2020.
2020.
Yes.
Okay. So, and so you've gone through different versions of treatment.
Yeah, I was on hormone therapy for 2.5 years,
Okay.
and it had me in remission, which is about the average amount of time that therapy will keep a stage 4 prostate cancer in remission.
Okay.
And then when that ended, the only choice left to stop the growth of the cancer was chemo. As
Okay.
long as I kept getting chemo every 3 weeks, the cancer would stay at a low level. And so that was what I did for 8 treatments until I quit. And that was it.
And why did you quit?
Because it was wrecking me. I mean, the first couple is, haha, your hair falls out. I got a runny nose today. And yesterday I slept all day. And there's different kind of symptoms. But
Sure.
when the nausea hit, the 6th, 7th, and 8th cycle, it got worse. Every symptom gets worse. That's why if you Google chemo symptoms, they'll tell you it gets worse every treatment, no matter what. No, you never get used to it. You kind of did. Somehow.
No, it got worse.
Yeah,
absolutely.
but
I just wasn't at that severe level that you were.
Yeah,
at.
but
you
I
started at a much higher level than
Right,
I did.
and I reached a point in my last cycle, I didn't eat for about 2 weeks, and that alone was going to do me, and I couldn't have been any more weak. I was depressed. I was, going out of my, and at the time I was thinking I'm done with chemo, but I told myself I have to wait till I feel good again, then decide if I'm done with chemo.
Okay.
I didn't, too easy decision to make under distress.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I waited till those symptoms were gone and the cycle was kind of through me. And before I went for the next one, I called him up. I said, I'm done with chemo. I'm not, and I haven't done it since, and I won't again.
Right.
And nothing against people who stay on chemo forever. I I don't think they're making a wrong decision, but that just wasn't my decision.
It's absolutely a personal decision for each person. It's
Yes.
what is it? What do I want out of these next, whatever the time I have left? What do I want?
My very first meeting with my oncologist, who's, he can't tell you how long you got, but he did say one thing that I found interesting, and I didn't quite get it, but he said, no telling how long you have, but I can probably keep you alive longer than you'll want to be. I'm like, whoa, what's that? And he said, well, it depends on how hard you want to fight. I mean, if you're determined to live to an old age, it's not going to be easy, And so that turned out to be very true. But I could have gone more cycles and the cancer would have stayed kind of in remission but I couldn't take it anymore. It was those treatments were killing me.
That quality of life thing is incredibly important.
Oh,
right?
Huge, yeah.
And I've heard you say this in the last, we talk a lot, and it was just maybe a month ago where you right now are having the best year of your life.
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I quit, because I was still healthy at the time. I mean, the chemo, it was knocking me out. But once I got through the cycle, I was still me at my kind of normal weight, other than being bald and stuff. But I snapped out of it pretty quick. It was just the next cycle would do it again. But I decided this is the time to quit. Why not have the year of my life? I love traveling. I got friends all over the country. Mm-hmm. Just by nature of I've lived in several places. I went to 2 colleges, so I just have connections all over that. Why don't I go see everybody I ever wanted to see? I have money, and that's kind of funny. I mean, I save for my retirement like everybody does, but I really didn't do such a good job if you compare it with my income and what I had, unless you're only going to live another year. Then I saved like a genius. I had enough to have the year, 5 years of my life, So that's what I set out to do. I'm not going to care what it costs me, and I'm going on tour. And as you know, I even got the T-shirts, and I've handed out 150 of them so far.
T-shirts that say, they're the cool logo where it says the John Bjorlie Die Happy Tour 2024. It's a black T-shirt, of course.
Yeah.
There's a reason
Right.
for that. Well, it's black. That's usually the color of death, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about some of the stops you've made along the way. Some of your favorite ones, because I think there literally are too many to go through in this conversation.
Oh, there are so many.
But let's start with the one in Rome, because
let's start with the biggest one.
Yeah.
Because I've had so many experiences that have happened to me in the past year, and I always follow it up with that it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in this situation. I would not have gone to see this person. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have gone there. But I did because of this situation. But my hometown of Rome, New York, I've always kind of said, I've lived in Phoenix over 30 years now, however long, and I couldn't get enough people to half fill a room at a funeral here, I don't think. I've got friends that golf, but, people come and go. But I always knew if I ever wanted to actually have a funeral that was attended, it would be up in Rome, my hometown. And I can thank Facebook a lot for that, because, these are contacts that I probably would have lost if not for social media. So I've got a big bunch of friends who are up in that area. So it occurred to me, why don't I have the funeral while I'm still alive? So
genius.
I threw the John Bjorlie celebration of life. Come see the cadaver while it's still walking and talking. And it caught on. It all started with, I told people I'm going to be at a certain bar. If you want to stop in, I'll buy you a drink. That turned into one of the nicest restaurants in town, their banquet hall, and filled with, we were charged that night for 50 people, but I think more than that came and went throughout the night. Yeah. It was crowded like a wedding. And I've never... I'll start crying if I start talking about this. Every single person there meant the world to me. And what was weird, it wasn't just my Rome friends. People heard about it, and people came from around the country. People came from other states.
Yeah.
I had one friend who showed up. He was from Pennsylvania, an attorney, and because of that, he said, believe me, I had 10 reasons why I couldn't come to this thing. And we weren't even that great of friends back in high school.
Okay.
But... a guy's throwing his own celebration of life. I got to see this. And that's why he,
Yeah. I know you have a great friend maybe once again somebody you weren't really tight with in school, but Steve has reached out and
Yes.
talk a little bit about Steve. He's done some
Steve Marshwinsky.
Yeah, and what he's done for you, and also how he was I think he was a big part of the event in Rome.
Huge. And now, so here you're trying to make me
I'm
cry
not.
purposely. Steve and I were friends. We were good friends in junior high. Kind of went different ways in high school. I mean, we said hello and all those things, but he had a girlfriend he was with all the time, and that one of those deals. So,
Sure.
But then we saw each other at a reunion or two here and there along the way. So we stayed in minor touch. But the moment I got sick, I shouldn't say the moment I got sick, the moment I announced I was sick, which was about 6-8 months after I actually got sick, but I put it on Facebook, hey, everybody, guess what,
Yeah.
But Steve saw that, and Steve said, first of all, he's a retired hospital administrator. He started out his medical career as a nurse, and even though he's retired, he still holds his nursing license to this day. And he said, John, I've seen 1,000 of you, and I'm here to make sure you get through this.
Nice.
Any questions you have, anything you need. So even though I have this team of doctors, I've got a doctor for every, I was going to say for every hole. We can cut that in post, right?
I might not.
But of all the medical people around me, he's really the main one. He's the one who's right. And we're great friends. We sit, we talk, we make each other laugh every day, but still almost at the top of every day. He wants to know how I am, how I'm doing, how is this, how's your weight,
Yeah.
And then, yes, the event in Rome, I started organizing it myself. And I called the woman who owns this restaurant that we wanted to go. It's probably the most popular restaurant in town. It's been there forever. But I was having a hard time. I didn't know how many. She wants to know how many people are going to be there. How many? How much? What do you want to serve? And it was hard enough that I was doing this thing.
Yeah.
I backed out of it, and Steve said, "I'll take it from here." And he arranged everything. He asked me, a few things like about what do you want to serve for food, and but otherwise he did all he took care of it. So all I had to do was really show up and then pay the bill at the end.
Real quick, rattle off cities where the tour has traveled to.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Blythe, California, of all places.
Nice.
I have a friend from the LA area. We met halfway, which happened to be Blythe, and we still joke about what a horrible town that is.
Sorry, people of Blythe.
But I know, but what a funny place to,
Yeah.
Tampa, a couple times, Atlanta, South Carolina, it goes on. Baltimore, Virginia. I've been pretty much all over the eastern seaboard.
Yeah.
And then somewhat in the west, California, took a road trip with a friend. So it's been every few weeks. I've been kind of going somewhere on average.
What does your doctor say to you when he sees you at an appointment?
Well, it depends which doctor, but
Well, let's start with. Let's talk about the doctors you have real quick.
Well, I have an oncologist, a urologist. I have a heart doctor because I had one issue that they wanted to make sure wasn't my heart. Turns out I don't have a great heart, but I don't have to worry about it. I know. Probably in about 10 years, there might be time for a bypass. Okay. So I don't know if I told you that. I have the same thing with my eyes. I've got a problem with my eyes that when I got a new prescription, the doctor said, look, I got some bad news for you. Basically, you need surgery, or you could go blind. I'm like, question, how long till this blind thing? Because I'm at the end of life here. And she's like, oh, you're good. Never mind. I'm like, so you were just trying to prevent me from being blind at 90? She goes, yeah, that's pretty much it, But yeah, I got some ocular something going on, but don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
I barely have to brush my teeth anymore. Kidding.
So the other doctors you have. You have one, yeah.
My main now primary doctor is a palliative care doctor or a hospice doctor. I'm in a hospice company, and so I check in with them. I go in there once in a while, but as time goes on, they're going to be coming to me a lot. I already have a nurse who comes once a month, but that will continue more. I mean, eventually there will probably be hospice volunteers in here, cleaning if I don't know. but I'm already hooked up, But you don't get to actually get into a hospice bed, like in a place, till they think you have 5 days left.
Wow.
So I'll be paying attention to that
move.
Ride.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, where are you bringing me?
Tell me what he says to you when he sees you.
He loves it because his whole career is hospice, helping people die comfortably. I mean, that's really what it is. But he just said recently, the last time I saw him, he goes, all the other patients I have at your stage are not like you. They're crying, they're mad, they're angry, they're scared, they're clawing for any type of thing to save them, And he goes, not you. You're just Mr. Happy Face about the whole thing, having the time of your life. He said, whatever you are doing, keep doing it. And that's what I've been doing.
That's awesome. So the tour will continue as long as you can continue it.
I've made plans as far as December so far.
Wow.
So I'm planning on being here. Yeah.
John, I'm going to ask you a question that you've kind of proposed it to me. It was a really cool question that someone had asked you.
Oh.
And I'm going to see if you have an answer. I hear you over there. What is something that used to be important to you that no longer is? And to follow up on that, what is important to you now that didn't used to be?
And it's the friend who asked me, I said, that's such a great question because it really got me thinking. And there's lots of little things that could fall on either side of that question. I'm not as, I don't like Lucky Charms as much as I used to, whatever. But I said, I want to answer the question in the biggest possible way. And simply, or as simply as I can make it, the thing that used to be more important to me before I was ever diagnosed was me. My possessions, what I'm doing, how much money I have, how much money I've earned, what my plans are, how can I have fun this month, where am I going next, how new is my car? That was a bigger concern to me. Not that I was me, I wasn't a complete flashy guy, but my future, me and my future was my biggest concern. And that's become much less important to me because the way I see it, I don't have a future, and it's almost liberating it, in a way to know that I'm somewhere near the end. And material possessions seem to mean nothing in this whole time. I've been blowing money like crazy this whole year, and I've got nothing to show for it. And I love that. I have a toaster oven that really needs to be replaced, yet I don't, because that's my bit. But I've been having a blast doing all this other stuff. I don't remember the question I was answering.
Yeah, the question. Now you got that. But then, how about the question is, what is important to you now that didn't used to be?
Other people.
Yeah, I want you to dive into that a little bit. What that means.
Like I said, the me used to be a lot more important to me. And back in the day, not that I didn't think of other people, but I only had so many friends. I mean, you're certainly one of, but I didn't have a big wide range of friends, a lot of acquaintances.
Right.
But I wasn't so worried about making others happy, maybe, and I did the normal things friends do if someone needs a help or, whatever. But in this, since I was diagnosed, since I knew I'm somewhere near the end, those relationships with other people, I've resurrected some that were old, and now they're great friends again. I've met people in the past year that I've gotten incredibly close to, that never would have happened. Just we met by some way or on one of my tours or something, and just that's what it's been. And I guess I can say that I've really enjoyed passing out a lot of money, and it kind of the easiest opportunity is like service workers in restaurants, and I've been going nuts for like the past year.
Give me your largest tip you've left so far.
Well, my event in Rome, there was like a $300 or $400 tip built in, and then she got tips from people throughout the night as she brought drinks. We only had one servant. She was really working, but I gave her $900 on top of all that. So I think that was my biggest number to one person.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been with you at a dinner before, and I've watched you on a $80 dinner tip somebody $120.
Yeah, 100%, 200%.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I enjoy it more every time.
You're bringing a ton of joy.
Oh,
to
it
somebody.
does. The ones who realize it while I'm still there, you don't know a thank you like that. But a lot of times I like to just leave it and slide out.
Yeah,
It's
slide out,
it could be a $100 dinner bill, and I might put $500 on it, on top of it, and just vanish and wonder what happened. How did that play out when they discovered it? You know.
Yeah.
But and other people. I'm not putting this out there. I'm not saying, hey, anybody need money? Hit me up, because it's not that at all. But other people who have needed it along the way,
Sure.
people who are having a hard time, if I hear about it and all, it's just been a fun. And again, I was not one for giving away money. My whole
John,
life was about
John. I know that very well.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Thrifty was.
you owe me $1, by the way.
Oh, I do. If that's a Super Bowl bet. Okay.
No,
great.
no. The water bet.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, the 18th hole.
Yeah, I owe him $1 for the 18th hole today. Who can hit it over the water but not hit the wall on the other side? Okay, never mind. John, this has been amazing. I'm going to give you the same final question I give every guest. This will be really fun because you've never been involved in real estate other than your own properties. But if you had one piece of advice to give to a new agent just getting started, what would you tell them?
Well, the answer when you first mentioned me that you might answer that question, the first answer that came to my mind was a great potato salad is nothing more than potatoes, eggs, and mayonnaise. If you know that, you can be a superstar in life. You never know when you. But that's my funny answer. If there is a serious answer, because I don't. I know, like I said earlier, I joked, aren't we all realtors, really? I mean, it's as long as we're all involved in property and, but if I was a realtor, I imagine that I would, this sounds easier than it probably is, but I would say keep getting listings. I would just, the way I was with my company, with keep opening accounts, I never found that point where I can just rest on these 30 accounts for the next 3 years. And, because there would have been attrition, and all of a sudden I'm sitting with nothing, So I always open accounts. And if I was a broker, I think I would want my name attached to every listing that's out there if I could do it. And then, rather than always worrying about being the buying broker or whatever, especially with the changes that have been made recently.
Yeah.
But I would just, I would always be doing that. If I had 8 minutes to spare in between this and that, I would try to get a listing,
Gotcha. Well, John, I'll tell you, that's the first time that answer's ever been given in 400 episodes.
Well, which one? I gave 2 of them.
Well,
yeah, okay.
Both.
Okay,
the
all
potato
right.
salad and the listings. Because listings is fairly advanced for a new agent, but what you're telling them is this is your goal. You want to get to this place where you are controlling more of the transaction, right? Where you're the listing agent, and that's where all the good agents want to go. So it's a great answer.
Yeah.
You did great. What I'm going to do is, usually at this point I say if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do it? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your YouTube channel, with your permission, on the show notes.
That's fine.
As well as your name and Facebook so they can find you. I'll put your URL there. So if anyone's listened to this and they'd like to get more of these words of wisdom and to watch what's happening with you on the tour, they can go in the show notes and they can connect with you. And they should probably say something like, I loved you on the podcast. That way you know who they are and where they came from, and they're not just
that would be fine with me. I've picked up some friends along the way because you've mentioned me before.
Right.
And all of a sudden I got a few, few come in that way.
You said something today on the golf course that was pretty cool. And you talked about the fact that even though your time here is measured and we know it's going to be sooner rather than later, we'll call it, that makes you very happy to think that there's someone you were able to help in the last year. 40 years from now is going to be talking to her grandchild and sharing the story of John Bjorlie. What he did to help.
Yeah, even if it's not John Bjorlie.
Just some guy.
The guy who left me a $400 tip for a Coke. There's somebody that
it's very cool, yeah.
Yeah, and to feel that I touched the future in that way. That's just something that occurred to me recently.
Yeah, that's very nice. It's a legacy moment. It's kind of cool. I think it's amazing. So, you know how much I love you. I want to thank you for doing this episode because I know it wasn't easy.
Oh,
it wasn't
you're welcome. Well, you make it easy, and I love you too. You know that.
So we will be at. If you're listening to this and you're in Phoenix, I'm going to throw this out there. You just missed us because 2 weeks ago we're heading to Encano tomorrow for our second round of golf.
Yes.
I make this trip out here, so we're going to have a lot of fun. I'll see you tomorrow, buddy.
Okay. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions. Please head over to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions to leave a review or a rating, and subscribe to the Real Estate Sessions podcast at your favorite podcast listening app.